I preferred the fast action. However, I don't agree that boxing is the fastest. I think hockey is probably the fastest. Hockey would be more difficult than boxing because in boxing you have no question of identification. You only have 2 men plus the referee. But in hockey you've got, well, excluding the goalies, you've got 10 men out there and a couple of referees, and and that puck travels pretty fast.
Yeah.
I would think that hockey would be the fastest sport, but I think the most difficult of all to broadcast on radio or TV is horse racing. Because when they make that turn for home, I don't care how good your binoculars are, if you don't know the colors of the horses and the saddle cloths and the cap, the color of the cap the jockey's wearing, etc., you can really get lost. And people have gotten lost with their descriptions of horse racing.
We've had Marshall Cassidy on and Frank Dwyer, who are announcers at Aqueduct and Belmont.
Right, and they are very good.
Very good. And when you think they have to make 10 or 15 different associations of memorizing colors, the names,
that's
of horses.
What I mean.
It's very difficult.
I did harness racing, trotting racing, but first of all, they're on a half-mile track and they go around twice and they don't go as fast, and you can almost describe, and I did describe them from the numbers on the saddle cloths that the horses were wearing. They have big numbers on them, but you couldn't do that in horse racing.
I think harness racing, the numbers are always the same, or the colors are always the same. Isn't that right?
Probably, yes.
Yeah. But in horse racing, you have a different color for every.
I always think that when the horses make the turn for home, and there might be 10 or 12 in the race, they all become bunched, and that's where the difficulty is.
Did you have anybody that you listened to pick up on boxing, or did you have to? No,
my predecessor was Sam Tao, but we were a different style, so I didn't learn too much from him. I more or less picked it up by myself.
You started out at WINS, isn't that right?
I started out at WINS, yes. I did my first boxing there, and it was a general station, and now it's all news, so they rarely do any sports anymore, although I think they did the Yankee games one year.
One year they did, right. What's coming up for you now? Do you have any cable boxing that you're going to be doing? I know you did the Leonard Hearns fight about 3 years ago.
Yeah, no, I'm about 90% retired now. If something comes along that they want me and I feel that I want it, I will take it, but it would have to be something pretty big. I don't feel like working on a weekly basis anymore. I did that for so many years. I think you just have so many broadcasts in you. I did over 2,000 fights.
Wow.
That's a lot of punches, isn't it?
Sure is.
Hi, Don. How are you?
Yeah, Mal, how are you?
Okay. It's really a pleasure and a privilege to be talking to you.
Oh, thank you.
I wonder whether you could tell us a little bit about the Lewis-Kahn fight, the first one and the second one.
Well, I can dismiss the second Lewis-Kahn fight with a quick brush because that was a terrible fight. It was so unlike the first fight, which I consider one of the great fights of all time. After the first fight, both Lewis and Kahn had a couple of fights, and then they went in the service for 3 years. So they didn't fight again until, their fight was in 41, they didn't fight again until 1946. And, Rust came in and not Art Rust. they got rusty in there, and they just weren't any good anymore, and they showed it. But that first fight was a real classic. Billy Kahn was he was practically a light heavyweight that night, fighting one of the great heavyweight champions of all time, and he just carried the fight to Lewis. He had you heard of the 1-2 in boxing. Well, he had a 1-2-3. He'd hook the left hand to the body and quickly bring it up to the jaw and then cross the right hand. And he would repeat that, and then Lewis just couldn't keep up with the fast punching of Kahn. However, in the 12th round, Kahn staggered Lewis near the bell, and Lewis rocked for a moment, but he didn't go down. And I think it gave Kahn the idea that he could knock out Lewis. Now, if he had gone into the 13th round without that knockdown, he would have continued a pace. He wouldn't have been so brash, but he decided to go after the knockout, and he traded punches with Lewis, even though when he was hurt. Lewis caught him with Kahn missed a left hook to the body and left himself wide open, and Lewis came in with a crushing overhand right to the jaw, and that staggered Kahn. Now, at this point, he normally would have run, got on a bicycle and bided his time to get his bearings back. Instead of that, he tore into Lewis with one of the most sensational rallies I've ever seen. But it wasn't enough. Lewis caught him again, and this time he knocked Kahn out. However, he did it at 2:58 of the 13th round. I always maintain that if the knockdown had come about 3 seconds later, Kahn would have been saved by the bell. You could be saved by the bell in those days. You can't now. Kahn would have been saved by the bell, and I think his tactics in the 14th round would have been different. Not that I'm saying he would have won, but I think it would have been a different fight.
How about some impressions of Joe Louis overall?
Oh, he was a great man. Besides being a great fighter, he was a gentleman, and I never saw him do I would use the word dirty. It isn't really anything like that in the ring, and a lot of fighters did it to him. They heeled him and they hit him after the bell and cuffed him, and I never saw him do that at all. He didn't have to. He was good enough to win without that.
How about Sugar Ray Robinson, sir? Your impressions of him?
I always think of, to use the old cliche pound for pound, that he was the greatest fighter of all time, at least the greatest that I saw. Although this Marvin Hagler looked pretty good last week. Can't take anything away from Marvin. He's good.
How did the Hearns Hagler fight stack up? How would you rate that fight?
I'd rate it as the equal, I think, of any sensational fight I've seen. I thought prior to that the first Zale Graziano fight for the middleweight title was the greatest fight I ever saw. But now, maybe this one was just as good, although the other one went 6 rounds and this went 3.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Don, I wanted to ask you something. You've done so many boxing matches on radio. Today that is really pretty much non-existent. Don't you think that might help the sport of boxing if they brought it back to some radio coverage as well as TV?
Yes, it might, if they would do fights that are not telecast, but most of them are telecast, and it would be most unusual for the people to turn on the radio and not watch the television if they could. However, I was always concerned about the blind people who were, I got letters from people, relatives of blind people saying, well, it's too bad the fights went off radio because that's all so-and-so had to enjoy. He can't watch television because he's blind. And that was really unfortunate when that happened, because these people were depending on radio. They get radio on baseball and football, and it's too bad they can't also get it on fights.
Don, I was wondering, what does Don Dunphy watch on television?
I mostly watch old movies, I think.
And what about in sports? What
sports? I like to watch baseball and boxing. There's a fight on tonight. Greg Page is fighting Tony Tubbs. That should be a good fight. Although I don't think the class of heavyweights is the best. I think other divisions are much better than the heavyweight class right now.
What division would that be, Don?
Oh, I think the middleweight. Oh, most of the lighter divisions are better. I don't think the light heavyweights are that good, or what they call the cruiserweights. But the middleweights and welterweights and lightweights and the super divisions, they're all good. They've got a lot of good fighters.
Don, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. I'd like to thank you for taking time out to talk with us.
Well, it's been a pleasure for me. I enjoyed it very much.
Okay, Don, we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
you.
Bye now.
Bye now.